Hi everybody, welcome back to Bentley House. I'm Aira, and if you're like me, you have a lot of these sitting around by now, and you may also be running short on craft supplies, which is a situation I'm finding myself in. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to turn this cardboard material into a dollhouse? I think this could be a really fun project for this quarantine time. But outside of that, I think it could be helpful in the future for those of you who may not have access to dollhouse kits, don't want to purchase a dollhouse kit, you have your own project in mind but not quite sure how to work with wood or don't have the tools to work with wood, or simply you just want to work with recycled materials, which is something I personally love to do. My goal with this project is going to be to use the cardboard to make a structurally sound dollhouse that is just as good as any dollhouse kit you could buy. Just as a fair warning, though I do try to use as many household recycled materials as possible, I do need to use quite a bit of hot glue and some Elmer's glue and a little bit of drywall spackle. Last thing before we get started, this is going to be part one of a two-part series. I didn't realize how long this project was going to take, and it's just not possible for me to get done within 1 week's time. And so at the end of this video, I will tell you what you can look forward to in part two. So let's get started. The first thing I did, of course, was make a plan. On the left here you can see my inspiration, a photo that I found online, and on the right you'll see me coming up with my idea, and I decided I wanted to slant the walls to give it a little bit more of an interesting shape, because I think that's a quality that comes with cardboard that can be difficult to get with wood, and I just really wanted to play around with that. So starting out, I set up a table and I got one of my giant cutting mats because I knew I was going to need a lot more room for this project than usual. I grabbed my Amazon boxes that had been stacking up in the garage and started to disassemble them. There are actually quite a lot of crafters that use cardboard in their creations, and I watched some of those channels and have been really inspired. So if you enjoy this and you decide you want to continue with cardboard, I'll leave the links to those channels down below and you can check out their channels as well. To create the pieces I'm going to cut my dollhouse out of, I'm using masking tape first to connect any of the box flaps and cover any Mars in the cardboard material. I'm also going to figure out which direction the channels within the cardboard are running. So this one's going horizontally, this one's going vertically. I'm gluing together these two pieces to make one piece, and because I'm making sure that the channels are going in opposite directions, this is going to strengthen the cardboard. It will make it more difficult for the cardboard to bend in any certain direction. The channels going in opposite directions make this stronger. Now I have a rather large thing of glue, it's just something I happen to have. So for the first piece that I am creating, I used glue and that worked really well, but I had to wait quite a while for it to dry, and later on I end up using hot glue, which works pretty well too. Now that this first panel is created, I can start sketching out my design for the dollhouse. Now I'm trying to have fun with this and not be too stringent with the measurements, so all I measured here was to make sure that the height was about 16 inches or a little bit more, because that means I would have at least 8 inches per floor, which would suffice for a 12th scale project. I am making this around 12th scale. I pictured this more of like a fairy tale fantasy project, so I'm trying to just have fun and not be too strict. I made two pieces that are the exact same shape and size, and those are going to be the two side panels for my dollhouse. For this second panel, like I said, I decided to use hot glue, and while this did make the process a lot faster, when I cut it up, if I didn't get hot glue absolutely everywhere, I did have to re-glue it every now and then. And of course, I made sure that my channels were both vertical and horizontal to make sure that this piece was as strong as the side pieces. The piece I'm cutting from this is going to be the very bottom floor of my dollhouse, and then I made a second piece that's going to be the upper floor. Now, in my original drawing, I showed you that I made the walls a little bit slanted. Everything is a little bit wonky, and I'm really enjoying that process. But to do this, I did have to bend the panels that I had just previously made very strong. So I used my ruler and held it in one spot and then forced the cardboard to bend in that area. Also, before gluing anything together, I need to cut out the windows and doors. It's just going to make this a little bit easier. Now I'm going to be gluing both side walls onto the bottom floor piece. And the way I'm using the hot glue is that I am initially putting down a line of glue just so that the two pieces kind of grab onto each other, and then later on I will go back and reinforce that with another line of glue that I make sure is as flat as possible. I'm now adding the second floor in, and this will help stabilize the two side walls. To create the back wall of the dollhouse, or in other words, the side that will not be open, I created another panel, and I'm going to start marking out the size that it needs to be so that it covers the entire back wall. Again, I'm using my ruler to force this piece to bend because it does have to make up for the fact that I made this kind of an hourglass shape. And here I'm using a pencil to mark off this section. Of course, my amazing camera skills, you can't see anything, but I'm sure you get the gist. After cutting the sides, I'm just going to recheck and make sure that everything is correct before I glue it on. Again, I'm adding an initial line of hot glue just so the two pieces can take hold, and once I feel happy with its placement, I can go back and reinforce each of these glue lines or glue areas with my glue gun. The next thing I want to talk to you about is support within the interior of the dollhouse. For this house, the width should be okay, or actually I should say the depth, because the floor inside is pretty skinny, but the length is pretty long. So I want to put a half wall inside of the house, and this will help support that floor so that over time it doesn't start to droop. You see this in a lot of dollhouse kits, and so it is appropriate for us to add it here. I am actually adding another layer or 2 layers of cardboard just to make these extra strong, and then I'm going to cut out an archway in the center so that it keeps this bottom room nice and open, but it does have the support that it needs from either side. And I probably should have said this earlier, but it's extremely important that you keep your blade sharp while you're working with cardboard, or you're going to get very frustrated. At this point, I decided to add in some of the cutouts for the second floor. I wanted to add a little, I guess I wanted to say balcony, but that's not what it is. It's like a jut out for a window. And then in my drawing, I had these 2 smaller windows. I'm just wanting it to be really whimsical and fun. For the part that juts out from the wall, I'm adding just lengths of 2-inch wide pieces so that it mimics where the opening is on the back wall. And then I'm actually going to take the piece that I previously cut out and use that with another triangle piece on top, and then cut the shape I want for my window. And because I'm just basically outlining the place I already cut out, it should fit in there perfectly, and I can just glue that in. I think this may be my favorite addition to the project, and I think it's what gives it kind of a storybook look to the final piece. I decided to go ahead and add some support beams to the underside of the floor, and this is going on the area that is a little bit wider. I'm adding some more beams in there because, as I said, I want this to be super structurally sound, and so the more supports I can add, the better. And I do feel this goes along with the fairy tale theme of having like some beams inside of a cottage. I also created this beam, which is 4 pieces of cardboard wide, and this is going to connect the 2 tops of the upper walls, and this is also going to be something I can glue the roof against. I decided to add another beam on the second floor that's going to go from the upper part. I guess this is a column, it's not a beam. If it goes horizontally it's a beam. This is a column, and I wanted to make sure that it lined up on top of the lower supports. So that's why I drew a line with the ruler, so I knew that the upper column lined up on top of what we already supported. I knew that this would make everything extra strong. Now it was time to add on the roof, and in order to figure out how big of a triangle I needed to cut to make allowance for this jut out piece, I am using this piece of cardboard to figure out what the very top line of my roof will be. So if my triangle's too short, my roof will go back a little bit, or it will dip down a little bit too far. And then I drew this second line, and it was up a little bit better. And once I got to this last line, it looked a little bit more horizontal, so I knew I needed to cut my triangle at least to there. So I made sure to mark it so I knew which one to cut, and then I knew where the two sides needed to be because it needed to match up with the walls of the jut out. So now I needed to make small pieces for this part of the roof, and I'm just taking a line from the side of the house. A lot of times if you're working with some crazy angles, look at what angles are similar to what you want and use those angles to start making your pieces. I used a pencil to start marking out where I wanted to make my cuts, and then I slowly came up with the shape that would work for this part of the roof. Then I just had to trace it and make two of them so that I could complete the roof itself. Then I just glue them down in place, and that part is done. The other side of the roof is a little bit easier, but also a little bit more complicated because while it is correct, it can be a little bit difficult for you to see what is inside of this house with this huge piece of roof. And so one thing I've seen on other doll houses is that they will make this U shape into the side of the roof. It still gives the illusion of a roof being there, but it allows for easy viewing inside the house itself. So all I did was cut that piece out and then glue it onto the beam that I had previously put in, and we're done with the roof. It's at this point that I realized I didn't have a staircase, so I decided to put in a balcony, and you will see in the end I still don't make a staircase, but it does give the opportunity for me to make a staircase in the future. And then I also add these four pieces thick beams that will help keep this balcony up. And then I also add in another beam that goes directly on top of the lower beam and then connects to the top of the roof. This one isn't really structural, but I think it helps give just a little bit of interest and possibly a little bit more support. Anywhere you can add support and add some architectural interest, I think you should just go for it. To create the next part of this project, I needed to curve some cardboard. So the way that you do this, that's the easiest I have found, is you make sure that your cardboard is sitting with the rows going vertically, and then you score down those rows. And as you do that, it will make it much easier for you to curve your cardboard. So I had already cut out some windows that I liked. I curved the cardboard, and then I kind of measured it against the opening where I wanted it to exist, and then I cut off the end so that it was the correct size. Remember, if you try this and you are scoring the cardboard, to be really light-handed with your craft knife so that you don't accidentally cut all the way through. Once I knew it was the correct size, I went ahead and made two semicircles that were the correct width for the opening. This is what's going to help make the shape stay. It's going to be basically the ceiling and the roof for my curved piece that's going to stick out from the wall. So I'm just going to make two of those and then glue them into my rounded cardboard piece. Once that's done, I can use more hot glue and glue it into place into the opening. By the way, I did want to mention that this was curved with just one piece of cardboard. I didn't try to double this up. But in order to reinforce it, I did decide to add a little bit more hot glue over those seams that I had cut with my craft knife. To add a little tiny roof on this, I cut a bunch of triangles and then added them until I liked the shape. I will later be covering these, so I don't really care how it looks, I just want it to be the correct shape. In the original sketch, I did add a tower to the left, and so I wanted that to be connected to the house, and to do this I needed to cut some openings, and my craft knife was not cooperating, so I decided to cut from the outside to open up two areas, both on the bottom floor and the top floor, that would open up to the tower rooms. To create the tower itself, it's going to be similar to the small room that we just made, but a little bit taller and a little bit bigger. I made 3 bases that are going to be our floors, and I took a large, long, just one piece, it's not a doubled up piece of cardboard, one piece of cardboard, and did very long cuts with my craft knife so that it will curve really nicely. Once I had done that, I took my pre-cut floors and I am going to glue them to one side and then slowly roll them. Here I'm just trying to figure out where the second floor needs to be glued so that everything lines up once the tower is finished. This is going to be a slow process, well, I'm going to speed it up for you guys, but what I'm doing is adding a little bit of hot glue and just slowly rolling, making sure everything stays as straight as possible until I have a completely rolled tower. Now that I have this piece, I can check it against the house, and I realize I'm going to have to cut into the roof just a little bit so I can get it as close to the side of the house as possible. So I did cut into the roof as close as I could without cutting into the interior of the house, which led me to realize that I still needed to connect it because there's a gaping hole. And so I took the piece I originally cut off from the side of the house, and it is going to be a great little gap filler. I don't want to connect the house and the tower yet because it's going to be easier to work on them separately. So I'm just going to attach the gap fillers to the tower and just leave it there for now. I do want to add some holes in the tower. I don't want it to just be a dark tower, and so I decided to make these really cool archways, and here I'm using the hot glue gun again just to reinforce those places that were cut with my craft knife originally to make it curve. So I do suggest you reinforce those areas a little bit. For now, the second floor is getting a rounded window that makes the tower look like a cyclops, but I will add more later. I also decided to add another couple strips of cardstock just to reinforce these columns I created at the bottom of the tower. Now on to some of the detailing. On the outside of the house, I wanted to add a frame around all of the windows, so I added a thicker piece at the top of the window and then some thinner pieces just to give some detailing around the windows themselves. And I don't show you all the windows, but I do this for every single window. And then I also added a little center mullion for that particular window. And then these are getting some horizontal mullions. I'm not quite sure the idea behind this doorway slash window. Like I said, I was just playing with it and having fun with the shapes. But I did decide to make that long skinny one a window. So here's the tower cutouts, and then I decided to cut out a space for maybe a rope ladder to hang down. And then I decided to close off the back of the upper tower so it does look like a completed cylinder once it's attached to the house itself, because otherwise it wouldn't quite look like a tower. So I did realize that some of these boxes had been previously used and loved, but all of these I did get from the garage, so this one was done being played with, but I did think it was fun to keep the little drawing, so the tiny little mermaid will take up residence in our house for now. I decided to create a base for the tower, and so to do this I just took a double sheet of cardboard and then traced out an arch shape around the tower and then hot glued it on once I had it where I liked it. To create a little mini roof around the first floor of the tower, I created these trapezoid shapes, and I also added this little band of cardboard so I had a place to glue the shapes onto, and very similar to the way I did with the rounded roof I did earlier, I'm just kind of using shapes and adding them to create the general shape that I want, not that this is going to be what the finished roof looks like. Here I'm using some thinner cardboard. This is from a snack box, and so it doesn't have the corrugation in the center of it, but it helps cover up some of those gaps created by the imperfect trapezoids that I cut. And then I'm just shaping the roof to get off any angled pieces that I don't like. Now I want to create a circle roof for the very top of the tower, like a party hat. And as you can see, this cardboard doesn't really want to do what I want it to do. It's bending at the prefabricated box places. Oh, and watch out for cardboard cuts, by the way. So to fix this, what I'm doing is I'm basically breaking the cardboard all around, and once I do that, it will do what I want it to do, and it makes a really nice circle roof for the top of the tower. So I just bent it back and forth a lot, breaking the inner corrugation to do that. So I didn't quite know exactly how to show you how sturdy this piece was, except by just I guess banging on it so you could hear that it's a fairly sturdy piece of cardboard. So if you just wanted to leave it at this, I think it would be strong enough to last for a while. But I did have an idea for if you wanted to make it even stronger. This is a 1-to-1 mixture of Elmer's glue and drywall compound, and I mixed it together and put it over these sample pieces of cardboard, and it is incredibly strong. These are just things that I had. This is from an old house project, like literally our real house. We had to fix some drywall, and I had this much left in the bottom, and if you don't use it, it will mold. So I decided to give it a go, and I mixed it 1-to-1 with this Elmer's school glue, and it worked even better than I could have imagined. Now I will say, before I add the mixture, I'm adding just straight drywall compound to the areas where you can see the cardboard corrugation. Now if you don't mind seeing the cardboard corrugation, feel free not to worry about this step. You could use it to add a lot of visual interest and texture, but I wanted to try and cover up the fact that this house was made of cardboard, just to see how I could do it, or if I could do it. And so in all the areas where I felt like there were gaps, I added drywall compound. Now because cardboard is squishy and you can squish it, the compound itself can flake off. And so by adding in the glue to the compound, it gives it an extra bit of strength. So everything I just did with the drywall compound by itself, I'm going to add this mixture on top of it, and it really just hardens up everything. Now just keep in mind, this does have some moisture inside of this mixture, so I did try to make sure and do both sides of the cardboard when I could, to try and prevent warping as much as possible. This is a fairly liquidy mixture. The glue makes it kind of drippy, so just be aware of that. But if you want to make it just a little bit less drippy, you can add in more drywall compound than glue. I cut out these little pieces from some more of those snack boxes, and I decided to give a little scattered brick texture. I'm not going to cover the entire thing with brick, but I want it to have that just a hint of interest on these walls, so it's not just this plain stucco look. It has a few bricks here and there. I am going to be covering absolutely everything in this mixture, and it takes a while. I suggest that you don't wear long sleeves like I currently am. I'm hoping it will come out of my shirt, but just be careful with this because it can be kind of sloppy and get everywhere. But I do like the result, and I think I will be doing this again. Here you can see me going over the original drywall compound with the mixture where it is mixed with glue. I did all the inside walls, but I'm leaving the roof and the floor plain because I will be doing those in part 2. So for now, everything that has been covered with the mixture, I will be painting and kind of trying to finish. You can see it has kind of like a stucco texture. Some of it was a little smoother than other parts, and that could be because I have an old case of drywall compound. If you get a new one where everything's nice and fresh, it may be a little bit smoother, but I actually like how it turned out. Now I'm just taking a fairly rough grit sandpaper and I'm going to go over any of the edges where I feel like it's just kind of sticking out. Make sure you wear a mask for this because it does get that drywall compound dust up into the air. I decided to mix a little abandoned coffee with some white paint so that we could, and by the way, abandoned coffee is a custom paint color that we mixed. Anyway, it's just brown. But I am going to be giving a base coat over this entire piece. And this is just going to seal off any of that remaining cardboard. It's just going to give it a base coat of paint. I decided to go with a light tan earthy color, and then I'm going to, in this video, kind of build on that with some other colors and some chalk pastels. It's at this point I realized my camera saw something much more interesting to film than what I had been filming for 4 days straight. And my dog caught the camera's attention, I guess, so we'll take a little stormy break and you can watch her play with a sock, which is her absolute favorite thing. Out of all the toys she has, she prefers socks. So I'm not sure whose sock this is, but I'm sure it's gone now. Getting back to the house, I decided I wanted to paint some of the details gray because I wanted them to stick out as if they were made of stone. So the casings around the windows and then the little stone details themselves are all painted gray. And then I also realized that some of the stones had popped up from the moisture of the mixture, and so I went back with some drywall compound and I just kind of filled in anywhere those stones had popped up. And I also had in my mind this vision of putting like little gray dots around to give extra interest, but I ended up not liking the dots and I turned them more into kind of rectangles, maybe to look like smaller stones that were peeking through. And so I did that here and there. I'm not sure if I like it still, but I did it. And then I'm going over everything with a dry brush of white. And I think this is going to bring it all together. And it definitely brings out that texture, which gives the casings of the house a little bit more of a look like stone. At first, I was worried that I had ruined everything with the dry brush of white, but I think the next step where I use chalk pastel really brings it all together. So if you hate this, hold on. I think it gets a little bit better with the next step. I made sure everything I did on the house I matched on the tower. That way when I eventually connect them, it looks like one cohesive project. I'm going to take this shaved chalk pastel in like this brownish color, and I'm going to start dusting it on places that I think would get a lot of wear, hands would touch, or dirt and grime would build up. So this would be on the sides of windows and in between stones, and also at the top where the roof meets the wall. I really like how working with the dark chalk pastel kind of gave a contrast to the white highlights I did with the dry brushing, and I think it really starts to make this paint job come alive. Now you will notice when I show you these final photographs that I did not do anything on the inside. And like I said at the beginning of this video, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. So stay tuned, it will get a little bit more interesting on the inside of the house, but I just wanted to finish the outside for now before moving on. So in the end, I'm pretty happy with the results. I'm not super excited about the tower. I feel like the top is looking just a little bit strange. I'm thinking maybe cutting it off or doing something a little bit different. I'm not quite sure. That's why I didn't put too much focus on the roof, but I will be working on that in part 2. I would actually love to have your input. So if you think this project should have a thatch roof, then I want you to go to the voting card. I never know where it is, so I'm just going to do this. Go to the voting card and vote either thatch roof or a shingled roof, and whenever I get to that point in the project, I will look up and see how many votes there are. I will also be working on the flooring, and I will try my best to make one piece of cardboard furniture to show you how working at a on a smaller cardboard project might go, because obviously furniture is going to be smaller than an entire house. So those are my goals for part 2 of this series. If you want to make sure and catch part 2 of this series, make sure you have clicked the subscribe button and the notification bell and clicked all notifications. That way YouTube lets you know when I upload the next video. I hope you all have an amazing week. Stay home, stay safe, show some kindness, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!